Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to SF Live. I'm Myrna Lim, your host. Tonight we have an incredible guest, a woman who has come from and conquered major challenges in life, to say the least. She is your typical American success story. I was talking to her earlier before we got started, and I told her, you know, you've got such a great story that Angelina Jolie could play your story. Anyway, her name is Thuy Nguyen. She is a general counsel attorney for Peralta Colleges. She just got appointed as an advisor for Access and Fairness in the California State Bar Association. And ladies and gentlemen, you gotta meet Miss Thuy Nguyen. How are you?
Hi, Myrna. Good evening.
Well, let's talk about, what's fascinating to me is your story that you were actually in a boat.
Mm-hmm.
You were 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so in most Americans' minds, they could easily see you in that situation. Here is a 3-year-old girl in a boat fighting for your life with your family. And here you are now, a successful woman, a general counsel for Peralta Colleges, married to a judge, 2 kids, and giving back to your community and being a role model for women. Now let's start about, do you remember much of what happened in the boat?
I don't, because I was 3 years old at the time. My family and I, because of the communist regime seizing South Vietnam, and Americans are very familiar with the war in Vietnam. When we fled Vietnam secretly at night in a small rickety boat, and we went with the boat because my grandfather was a fisher. And so he, was able to navigate the waters.
Right.
And really, we were just fleeing Vietnam. We were fleeing the communist government.
Right.
We had, my parents and grandparents had personal experience of the communist regime in North Vietnam. And they understood what that meant. And so they fled Vietnam with me, 3 years old, and my little brother, who's 2, in 1978. And we drifted in the Pacific Ocean for 25 days.
Oh, my goodness.
We had no idea really where we were going. And a big Japanese commercial ship saw us, saw this little rickety boat, and said, "You're going into a major storm. You're going to die for sure.
Right.
You need to go back." And going back was not an option for us.
Yeah.
And so we basically asked the ship and the captain to rescue us.
Right.
It took them a while because they needed to get clearance from Japan.
Right.
But they finally did, and then so they finally took us up to their big boat.
Right.
And we went to Japan.
Well, describe before you got in that boat, was it a whole townsfolk of people just fleeing their houses and running for their lives and getting in this boat? And you did not bring any personal belongings? I mean, money would have been useless at that point.
Right.
You would have just brought pictures, your food, but then rain, the natural elements.
Right. We definitely did not bring any major personal items.
Right.
Money, like you said, was useless, although I think they tried to, bring some gold because they knew at least that's transferable.
Right.
And, for obviously gas for the boat and so forth like that, but that's the extent of it. It's a small boat. It's a fisher, a village, a Vietnamese village type of fishing boat. So you can imagine it's very small.
Right.
And we put a lot of people in there. I don't know the exact number, but a lot. It was very tight. And most of them were my family members because my grandfather just grabbed all of us, and we fled at night to get on that boat. In terms of Vietnamese Americans in general, or any Vietnamese, because we have Vietnamese folks who fled Vietnam and went to France and went to other countries, Canada, etc. It's estimated, the United Nations estimated about 1 million Vietnamese people fled Vietnam.
Wow.
And they estimated that half of those million died at sea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was very big. We were very, very fortunate.
Were you being chased at that time? Were there the North Vietnamese, just going into people's houses and ransacking? What catapulted just like this community to just like pack up and run? I mean, that's kind of there must have been a lot of chaos and commotion and so forth.
Right.
Did you hear the stories from your folks about
yes.
that?
The main reason why a lot of us fled, my parents and my grandparents, and you know, to flee a country that you have such deep roots to is a big deal.
Exactly.
And the reason is because they understood what it meant to live in communist regime.
Right.
We've lost family members in previous situations to the communists when they were in North Vietnam. So, you know, there was persecution of my great-great-grandfather.
Wow.
My uncle was persecuted. And for those who stayed, who couldn't flee, you know, they found themselves, especially the men who were in the military, they found themselves in what is called re-education camp, but it's really labor camp for years. And so it was really trying to find freedom, trying to find democracy, and also being able to practice your religion, because you know the communists didn't have a particular good feeling about Catholics, and so we were Catholics, and we fed for those reasons too.
Well, so from Vietnam then, you ended up in Japan or something?
Yeah.
And then how long were you in Japan?
We were in Japan for about a year.
Wow.
You know, I have pictures of being in Japan, and it was just really wonderful. We had the Japanese people were very welcoming, and we were so grateful to them that my sister, the first who was born in America, my mother named her after a Japanese person.
Wow.
Her name is Luko.
Oh,
so her name is Luko Win. You know, because of the incredible gratitude we have toward the Japanese people.
Did you get employment right away, or your family did, source of income at that point?
Well, my dad, they did a very good job, because the Catholic charities in America helped us. In Japan, we were in the refugee camps. Right. And then when we came to America...
How many people were there in the refugee camps?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. But there were a lot. There were a lot of people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Couldn't even imagine that. And then, so you were in Japan for a year, and then after that, where did you go?
After that, they told us, you know, you have an option of going to Paraguay in South America, because that country is willing to accept refugees. And at that time, the United States was not technically accepting refugees, Vietnamese refugees. And so we were getting ready to go to Paraguay.
Paraguay's quite nice.
I guess.
Japanese prime minister, right? He got ousted.
But then, while we were, you know, in the process of packing for Paraguay, President Jimmy Carter passed the Refugee Act and said, America is now accepting refugees. Are you interested in going? And of course, my parents said yes. Yeah. And I often say how, you know, I am incredibly grateful to America for what it has offered. For my parents,
it's a great country, and we got to keep it like that.
It is a great country.
This election,
but you're absolutely right. We have to keep it like that, because, you know, its greatness can never be taken for granted. Exactly. And it's only great because of people like you and others who try to infuse it with innovation, hard work, and a real sense of democracy, a real sense of what's right, you know, what's good for people, and service to people.
We sound like an advertisement for America. America the Great.
Come to America. Exactly. It's very good.
Yeah, everyone charge any money for it either, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then when Jimmy Carter passed that, then where did you end up?
So we went. You know, we said absolutely.